And you were 100% right about the way the media misrepresented her when she first came to power. She was called a fascist, far right, a danger to democracy. So much hyperbole around her election, and she has emerged as you've explained, one of the strongest and most popular leaders now. And I was also interested in how she greeted the different world leaders. She's not shy about expressing how she feels about them, whether she likes them, like if it's the Argentinian leader, Javier Milei, she's obviously a fan, the Indian leader. And then when she was seeing some of the politicians she wasn't fond of, she could not hide her disdain. Clearly, Meloni is not an enormous fan of Brazil there, as you can see. And I think she saved her greatest disdain for Emmanuel Macron. She has had ongoing issues with him. But she's going to have the final laugh, Ralph, because Macron is in all sorts of trouble, as are many leaders she greeted during the G7. But she's likely to be there for some time.
I hope so. And one has to say, right, this is Italy. Italy has been a notoriously difficult country to govern, and they never or barely ever had a government making it through the entire legislative period without having it crumble or collapse. And she's doing a fantastic job, right? She's in a coalition government. So this is always what I tell the critics of her. I say, you think she's she's not like the American president, like she has to keep a coalition together and to govern. So this is very difficult. And as you correctly pointed out, she distinguishes, I think, very well on the global stage which world leaders are pro-Western and which leaders are not, which is why she gets along well with Milei,
Yes.
and which is why she's critical of Lula, for example. And the absurdity that we have in Western politics, right, where we admire somebody like Lula, who is absolutely anti-Western in his outlook, but we criticize somebody like Milei, who wants to be a pro-Western politician, is completely absurd. So this kind of self-hate that we see in Western societies as well, for example, with the pro-Palestine demonstrations, also has infected higher politics. That is a major issue. And I think she understands it. I think that Le Pen understands it in a way that Macron or Sunak simply do not grasp what's going on there.
Now, going back to France, there was a march against the far right, as the left call it. It took place in Paris over the weekend, but it seemed to be more like a march against France, against the West, Western civilization. There wasn't too many French flags I can see there, but plenty of Palestinian flags, kafirs and signs calling for intifada. Ralph, this was like a commercial for the national rally. I think they'd be quite happy to see this sort of footage going around the world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that ultimately this could also help her, because there is a growing impression, also I believe in the United States, and I think also partially in Australia, that the left tends to be for everything that's not the West. It doesn't matter what the idea is. And I think you see this if you take a closer look, right? Its green policies are anti-civilizational policies. You see the pro-Palestinian stance and anti-Israel stance is basically an anti-Western, anti-civilizational stance. And you see this in all these areas. And I think that gradually people are waking up to this, right? Originally, they really thought that the left is concerned with the cause, right? The environment, the plight of the Palestinians, you know, the plight of migrants. But the closer you look, these are just projections. What they're really interested in is to always take the position that whatever is against the West is the side they are with. And the argument, of course, as many have explained on your show, that's the essence of wokeness, right? It's always the oppressor versus the oppressed, and there is not a single scenario in which the West is not the oppressor. So whoever is on the other side, even if it's Hamas, right, they must be the good guys. And I mean, first of all, I think it's wrong. And I'm glad to see that more and more people wake up to this. And I just fear, this is all the biggest fear, that once again, the media will accomplish to blackmail people not voting into parties that take a pro-Western stance. So this is the only fear I have, because as you correctly pointed out originally, right, they're already jumping in this hypergear, also in the United States, also in Australia. It's the far right, it's the radical right, it's the extreme right. But if you look at their positions are the same positions that a common sense person, you know, is having today or would have had 30 years ago. I mean, Le Pen basically sounds like de Gaulle. Farage pretty much sounds like well, he talks differently, but his positions are basically Churchill's positions. So none of this is completely out of the extraordinary, but we have moved the cultural and academic institutions so far to the left that everything for them seems to be the far right. And the media, unfortunately, is part of that viewpoint. So they think that everybody who's just slightly right of the Greens must be a radical right-winger. And it's very, very difficult to fight against this.
You're right. It's the media. It's a big part of the problem. And also that institutional power that has been corrupted by the left. It started in academia, but it's gone much deeper than that. Ralph Schoellhammer, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thanks for having me.